Hello, good evening, and welcome to the CorrelAid Finnish Projects events. Um, if you've come to previous CorrelAid events, this one's going to be different. Previous events focused on showcasing NGOs that already work with data. However, for this one, we're going back to our roots. I'm Andrew, I'm one of the co-founders of CorrelAid, and we started CorrelAid because there's so much out there in the data science world. Most of it is built on open source. If you want a machine learning model that can do image recognition, you can go to the Inception, download a model and use it. If you want something with NLP, there's Hugging Face. There's tens of thousands of hours of GPU time put in there and open source for everyone. Now, the reason we start CorrelAid is there's a gap between the people that can make use of this open source tech, the amazing stuff that people have put out there, and the people that do good in the world and slowly do good. These are the NGOs. So there's a big gap of knowledge that we've seen between NGOs and being able to do tech. So we started CorrelAid to close that gap. And the way we do that is we scope projects together with NGOs and our wonderful team of, I think now 300 data scientists say if there's a project that that suits me or that my skill set works out for, or that's a skill that I want to learn, let me at it. I'll work in my spare time, roughly 4 hours a week, to bring data science and analytics to NGOs. So this event is going to be about that, showcasing a couple of projects that have come to completion. So on the agenda is we have Federico, Shayoni, and Jan, who will talk about the projects that they've recently completed. They'll be talking about 15, maybe 20 minutes with 5 minutes of questions. Again, if you have any questions, put them in chat or put in chat that you want to ask the question yourself. After the first two, we'll have a short 5-minute break, get coffee, get tea, and then proceed to Jan. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Federico to join the stage.
Great, Andrew. Thank you so much for inviting us and to actually organize this as well with the rest of the CorrelAid team. I'll start to present our project. Can you confirm you can see my screen? Great. Well, yeah, the name of our project was Mos Marley, that in Kosovo means go take the mountains. And it's a project that we actually run to jointly address the deforestation issue in Kosovo. It's a joint effort. It was a joint effort because, as you can see, seen different parties involved. The CorrelAid team with the volunteers, the Sustainable Leadership Kosovo, SLK. We'll talk about this a little bit more later on, and the Institute of GIS and Geospatial Technology of Kosovo. Well, the team, the volunteers, Alik Bird, Federico Franciamore, and Jordi de Jong. We were originally with other two members that they, for other reason, had to leave the team. But Alik has a background in environmental science. I'm a GIS and remote sensing specialist, and Jordi is a GIS expert and graphic designer. And during our work, we had the chance and the opportunity to work with the SLK, which is this NGO from Kosovo, different values that they have, but mainly basically to support well-being of different entities as well as animals and people as well. And they collaborated with Farouk from the Institute of GIS and Geospatial Technology to assess this deforestation issues. The people involved from SLK were Indira and Rina, and from CorrelAid mainly Mistrat and Andrew, as well as Victoria at the beginning. Well, the problem, as I will mention before, deforestation. Deforestation is a big issue worldwide, but specifically in Kosovo. The problem that we had to face was the validation of data they were retrieved, and the non-transparency and the corruption in policy and politic entities in assessing the problem of deforestation in Kosovo. What we did was to use Earth observation data, or at least this was Farouk work, and we had to validate this data. This was one of the goals of this project. And why Earth observation data? Because they are scalable, so you can scale up the analysis to a lot of areas. And in our case, it was for an entire region of Kosovo. They use multispectral sensors, so data can be collected even during cloud coverage. They can furnish real or near real-time alerts and assessment, their cost effectiveness, and they are deliver non-disputable information. So this was the case because obviously the government or the entities, local entities, were a bit denying what is happening in Kosovo. So recapping a bit the project goals, we had to validate these geospatial results, create and spread awareness, and to tell this story. How we did so with our web platform or a website page that we insert into the SLK website. First of all, validating this data retrieved using different sources. For example, Global Forest Watch, which is worldwide a recognized entity to assess deforestation. Create a storyline with the help of master story Ashraf Ramsey. It was a difficult process to identify what was this storytelling process and how to announce this information delivered by the data. And we developed this online platform, as I said before, directed mainly to two users, to two user types. I will show you later on, but including basically maps and data. So we want to have a project that was still data driven, with some appealing graphics to spark the attention and interest of the users, and now and then to insert some touch points to let the users, the visitors of this platform, get in touch and eventually take action. Well, I can show you the demo. As you see, this is the website of SLK. There you can find a lot of other information and about their other projects. And in the menu, you can find this Mos Meli. And well, the first page that we developed was about general information that we want to give. So because this platform had to give insight on what action the user could take to avoid the problem of deforestation, we have short list here, well, the actions that the user could do. And then we divided the users into two main categories. One is the tourist, or either the nature lover, or well, sorry, I was here, nature lover, or the hiker, the activist. The other user type would be that student or teacher, so for educational purpose. If you access this category here, well, we tell the story a bit more in deep, and we use these animations to make awareness give awareness of how many hectares were deforested in 20 years of data collected, and the respective football fields that are correspond to. And then the most interesting part, at least from my side, that I'm GIS remote sensing enthusiasts, was the use of maps. So the use of maps to a bit show what is the advancement of deforestation in these 20 years. We discussed a lot on how to do so, and probably at the beginning we thought, well, let's put what is the deforestation in a timeline here, and the user can just scroll and see for each year what was the deforestation detection. But something that came up from the feedback with the SLK was, well, that's good, but this is not really impressive of how the user can perceive this problem. So we decided to create this cumulative forest loss map. So basically the user can scroll through the years, and instead of showing just the deforestation for that year, we have a cumulative map. So this is all the deforestation events that occurred in this specific part of Kosovo, but this is obviously a possible and available for other parts of the country. Where were the data that we use for this, or the Farouk used for this mainly? Already Sentinel-2 and NASA Landsat 8, so free, available, open data. And then our goal was to validate these results, or the methods and the model that Farouk used, using basically three other methods. The visualization inspection that we basically did run using high resolution imagery on over 200 patches were lost, and you can see here basically an example. So we went to a specific place in the map that was mapped out as a deforestation event, and then we checked an image before and after to look and visually inspect if that deforestation really happened. And then another validation method that we used was the one using Global Forest Watch, as I mentioned before, to compare the two estimations. And this is resulting here in this graph. As you can see, it's amazing how the deforestation detected by the models of Farouk and the one from Global Forest Watch, which use just Landsat data, it's really, really relevant, and basically has the same trend. We even saw that the SLK estimation were even overestimating the Global Forest Watch. Sorry, underestimated the Global Forest Watch. That means the Global Forest Watch detected even more deforestation events. Another method that we used was the change detection using radar satellite imagery. This was at least to avoid the cloud coverage, because this type of data helps in this task. Then, as you can see, we input here some touch points. So how can you help? Contact us. for further explanation and how to participate in addressing this problem. Quickly, I want to show you as well the other version, which is the version of the students and teachers. That is more, as I said, for this educational purposes. So explaining really from the basics, what is deforestation, what is happening around the world, and as well around Kosovo. So specific data for the Earth, but as well in Kosovo, and how we do detect this deforestation. How do we create this map here that you can play around using satellite imagery and satellite technology? The situation in Kosovo, you can scroll down some nice information. We use this always correlation with football fields just to give a better indication about the area interest of deforestation, and as well here the comparison. So this was the deforestation online platform. Hurdles, for sure. We came up with and we tried to tackle them as a team, even if, as I said before, the team was reduced since the beginning. But sometimes the method, or at least the purpose of the platform, was not clear since the beginning. So we knew where we wanted to go. We knew that we want to have a platform to actually sensibilize and to raise awareness, but we didn't know who was the user type, how to involve the stakeholders in a really more directed way. And I can tell you, storytelling, or at least storytelling writing, is difficult. We were super grateful to have Ashraf on board to give a lot of support, but as well, there were some tough moments where we had to struggle and to see how to create better this storyline. We had some nice follow-ups. First of all, internal follow-ups within the team, within the 3 different organizations, because we organized this feedback sessions with a whiteboard kind of moment where we, evaluate our work, what could be done better, what are the next steps for the future. And the platform was presented in a live event dedicated to such topics in Kosovo already. Can be used, and it will actually be used as a tool to basically participate, to involve people in the participation of a big event in Kosovo in 2022, which will take place in the mountains of Kosovo, and as well as to reunion activists and people that are more sensible, and to create even new campaign as a plant a tree campaign. I want to say goodbye with the quote that we put inputs in our work. It's time to act as if we can't breathe tomorrow. So we want to give kind of this sense of urgency, because there is an actual sense of urgency in solving, or at least talking and tackle this problem. So we hope to you to visit the platform and to give us even further feedback. Thank you so much. And obviously I'm here for questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Again, if you have questions, raise a hand in chat or write it down in chat. If you don't want to speak it out loud, then I can read it out for you. So I have a question, Federico. This project was very much about storytelling, and it's especially towards a user group that doesn't have a data science background or even an academic background. Could you talk a little bit more about what you faced in trying to make a story for?
Yeah, this is a problem that personally I always face every day in life. Like, I live in a bubble, in the sense of, for me, maps and satellite are something that are, daily thing that I use, or at least that I'm used to discuss with my colleagues, with my with the clients itself. They usually are already there at that level of knowledge with the use of these technologies and data. But it was a bit difficult to fill this gap of how we do explain this even to people that they wouldn't actually need such a data driven approach. And the storytelling moments where we had to discuss all this information that we wanted to deliver and to make sure that this would get to the user were the toughest time, I guess. Then on the other hand, something that we get used to, not recently, but at least in the last 10 years, is the use of maps, it's like, or digital maps. So having the chance to display information, as I said, to stress the fact that this information, because they come from satellite imagery, although there could be something wrong in the models, nothing is perfect, but still the not disputable information that this type of data can deliver, and how instead of just people that are like my mom would actually access to this platform, but even convince policymakers or people who has to take action and probably will be responsible for many other actions of the people. This was as well considered into this storyline. But yeah, it was tough. It's tough to actually trying to we came up at the end with these two user types because we wanted to include as well the educational part, but to an ICARE and an activist can have a total different view of the world and how to use the data. So we tried to give there the romantic part with the storytelling, like, oh, our beautiful Kosovo, our mountains, our water, but then at the end put there as well some data and some graphs, that numbers that could actually be more helpful for more data-driven people.
Thanks. Yeah, the other question is the counterfactual. So if you three or you five weren't there to start this project, do you think SLK would have done something similar to this?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was a good mix of people in the sense that we didn't have we had almost the same background, but now different expertise within the team. For sure, Georgie was really well driven by this graphics, designs, how to design the icons, this type of communication. And from my side instead, I was more focused on the type of validation data and as well as for Alik's side. But yeah, well, I wouldn't know how to answer this question, to be honest, but I think it would be would be probably something different than we did at the end, because of this multidisciplinary approach, probably. So trying to tackle this issue from different sides, and just the common line was the storytelling. So to raise awareness, to say a message, to tell the story, which is not always the case. For example, in my case, I have just to solve a task. I have to just assess, or so you don't always have to storytelling everything. But in our case, this was the main point. So yeah, I guess something different probably from their perspective.
Thanks. No, the question was more towards if the group hadn't taken up this project, would something similar have happened?
Oh, the group specifically, you mean? No, as a project with CorrelAid. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. This was my first experience with CorrelAid, so I wasn't involved in other projects. But no, yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know. The task was quite specific at the beginning, you know, it was like creation of this tool to communicate something. So we probably then it was easier to think about a story map kind of thing.
Awesome. Are there any other questions from the audience? All right. Then thanks, Federico, giving
Thank
the
you.
hand. And without further ado, next up we have Shayoni.
Hello.
Yes, awesome. Floor is yours.
I'll share the screen. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we've got a visual.
Great, thank you. So my name is Shayoni, and I worked on the Safety Pin project with CorrelAid, and it was my first project. And I had two more team members. One unfortunately had to leave quite early. The other one was Evelyn. So I finished my master's in physics recently from Cologne, Germany, and Evelyn finished her data science bachelor, and now she's working with KPMG, which is amazing. So the Safety Pin project, we had a lot of issues with it in the beginning because they didn't know what they wanted. So it was both good and bad because we had a lot of freedom to do whatever we wanted with the data, but also we didn't know if they would like what we did. So there was advantages and disadvantages. So yeah, so there are two types of data that SafetyPin had. One is the user app data. So every user can download the app. And then there are 9 parameters that they can score on, for example, lighting, people, stuff like that. There are other visibility and other things like that. And based on it, they have a weighted formula that they have come up with depending on which parameter would be the most important parameter to consider when you're giving a safety score to an area. So that is the app. And the second one is the Safety Pin Night, where they train their volunteers and then they go around the city taking pictures. Then they have the algorithm to turn those pictures, image analysis, they turn those pictures into safety scores again. They have the 9 parameters that we use, and plus they have extra parameters. For example, if there was a street light there, if there was a police station there, or other stuff like that, which we didn't know what to do with because they didn't know what they wanted with it, technically. So anyway, so we worked on the basic 9 parameters from both data. First, we did the basic EDA. So we saw if there was any gender difference, like if more female were using or male were using, because that would have been something we could have looked at. But as you can see, it was pretty much the same. Then we did, this was the number of audits per user, but there was nothing special about it. Some people used it more, some people used it less, probably because of the places they live in. And then age of users. So this is a very big one, but this is just the default one. So if you don't want to put your age in, this is the default that goes. So most of the people chose. So this is just one city data, which is Kolkata in India. We took it as an example data to work all our algorithms with. So apart from that, the age wasn't very noteworthy. It was nicely divided. So we thought what we should do is look into morning and night data. If people are using it in the morning, then the algorithm that they're using to get a safety pin would be different, because they're giving a lot of weightage to the lighting parameters, and in the morning that parameter is not very important. So even though for Kolkata data we had 65% morning data, I checked it with the other cities, it was less than 10% for most of them. So there was something wrong with this particular city data. But yeah, as expected, that even when the morning data is 0 for lighting, the safety score is 4 because of other parameters, because lighting doesn't matter. And when the lighting is low for night data, of course, the safety score would be low because at night lighting is more important. So we thought that this would be important, but it wasn't, because the other cities did not show this much discrepancy in the morning and night. So we left it. So we moved on to locations. whether the image analysis data and the user data were similar for similar locations, because there has to be some similarities. So we rounded the locations because for the image analysis data was almost 3 times more than the user data. So we rounded all the locations, latitude and longitude, to third decimal place, which is almost 100 meters difference, which is not too much, but it was also their criteria that every 100 meters they take a picture. So it was a good idea to do that. And then we did a reverse geolocation and compared the two data. So the strange part about this was that there was more than 55% in every city. They had like 10 cities or so. Every city has more than 50% data, which was different for the same location, which is something they were very interested in and they would look at, because that means, sorry, their image analysis algorithm has some issues with it. So that's why they came back like 2 weeks after we had finished the project for me to check the different cities, and it was true for every other city. So this was very interesting that they thought. Then was the visualizations that we did. So the finding that we had was actually proved by the visualizations that we did. For example, in this area, with the image analysis data is mostly green and yellow, which is around safety score 4 or 5. But with the user data, it's mostly red, which is around 1 or 2. So there is a difference. Of course, there is like 3 times less data. So to get more data, like you can't change that. More users use it, then you have more data. You can't really make a difference with that. But yeah, they would look into that. And the best thing was the heat map visualization, which they wanted. We used the OpenStreet heat map, OpenStreet Maps, which is open source. And we created a heat map. And what we did extra was give a parameter where you can add establishments into the map to show whether those establishments makes the place safer or more safe or less safe, right? So there you have blue police stations and the pink ones are bars. So where there are more police stations, of course, it's darker green, which means better safety. But where there are pink colors, it goes lighter, sort of. So that's maybe something to look at, because what SafetyPin does is if there are some issues around an area because of some establishment or lack of lighting or something, they go to the proper authorities to change that. So this is why they wanted this kind of visualization, so they could take actions. And they have done that before, and this is why we did it. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, if you have questions, phrase them in the chat or raise your hand to ask it yourself. Yeah, could you expand a little bit more on what SafetyPin does with the data and the safety score? So what kind of impact do they have with the safety score, which you're helping to improve?
Okay, so they are mostly for women in a way, but it's for everyone. So when you go to a new place, for example, you don't know if a particular alley or a city is safe for you. So if you have the SafetyPin app, then you can check whether you should go there, whether there's enough lighting, whether there are enough people there, if there's a bar, if there's a police station and stuff like that. So that is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make this information available to the people and like just increase the safety of people, like make better choices by knowing the place better. And what they do with the ultimate safety scores and all these things is they go to the proper authorities. If the safety score of the place is very low, then they go to the government or the whatever authorities there exist to tell them about it. For example, if lighting is less, then they tell them to put a street lamp there. Or if there are no police stations for 3 kilometers around, then they tell them, okay, this place is not safe at all, then maybe put a safety security guard or something around. And they have done that in, I think, Delhi and Kolkata and some cities in Africa and Sri Lanka. So yeah, that's what they do.
Awesome, thanks. I noticed with the bars and police stations, there were not a lot of dots there. I'm pretty sure there's a couple more police stations and bars. Could you talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, so that was also a question which SafetyPin asked us. The point is that if we are going to smaller cities, not all the police stations or bars or bus stops will be uploaded online because they are not very tech savvy government people. For example, in India, the government people are not very tech savvy. I am from India, I can definitely tell you that. So that's why you don't see all of them. This is like maybe 1/3 of the police stations that actually exist. There are much more police stations, so we don't know how to solve that. What they were doing before is using Google Maps, but they are usually paid maps, which we didn't want to use, which would be better. But yeah, we chose OpenStreetMaps. Like this would at least give you some idea for comparison.
Thanks. Again, if anyone else has questions, please come forward. So maybe just a general question. What did it feel like doing this project in your free time?
It was really fun because right now I'm very free. I'm looking for a PhD right now, so I have nothing much to do. Just sitting at home doing a project was nice, and because also I was doing a data science course on DataCamp, this was like, okay, I can use my knowledge here. And yeah, it was really nice. And the people I was working with, including you, was nice. So yeah, I got to learn something new, and yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Applause for Shayoni. Yeah, we've been busy for about 40 minutes, so let's take a brief 5-minute break. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. Yeah, cool. So we have one final speaker, Jan, who is going to talk about his experiences at Pacheco. Without further ado, Jan, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you for organizing this event and providing the opportunity to speak here. I'm going to talk about the collaboration with CorrelAid and Pacheco, which I was lucky enough to be working on. And first, to give you a bit of structure about the presentation. First, I'm going to give an introduction, give a bit more context on the project. Then I'll be talking about getting the data, then understanding the data and being very much surprised by the data, which were kind of like the three big parts of the project so far. And then I'm also going to provide an outlook because the project is still going on. First, some context on Pacheco. So Pacheco is a large charity operating in Thika, Kenya, and they're focused on helping children. And they do this by providing interventions from this toolkit they have. So they have this toolkit of a lot of interventions, and these can range from, for example, providing school lunches at school, over covering healthcare costs if a child is sick and not covered by insurance, all the way to monetary help for the parents to start a business so that they can provide better for the children. And this is just like a minor example. Like there's a lot of interventions they have in their portfolio. And also one of the big tasks they have is always like finding the right intervention to use at the right time. And a bit of context on how I was involved in this project. I spent 3 months as an intern at CorrelAid Netherlands. And I was involved in multiple projects there, but Pacheco has been the main project I've been working on there. And going into this project, there's been some talks between CorrelAid and Pacheco before I joined the project. And like the two rough goals that were there like before the project like fully took off were roughly to like understand and assess Pacheco's impact and then use insights from that to improve their efficacy and efficiency. So without further ado, to getting the data, because of course that's, I think with every data science project, the first step you kind of always have to go through because you need some data to work on. And in this case, it's been actually, there were like the first hurdles we've encountered in this project. So because of course, they have, Pacheco uses the database they use with data also for their internal, to just power the business basically. So it also has a lot of personal identifiable information. So that's why we couldn't just access the database, because this is of course, yeah, for like privacy reasons, we can't get access to that and we shouldn't. So that posed the first problem. And this was first addressed by providing us some anonymized exports of the data. However, these were created manually in the beginning. So someone just exported all their data and then manually using Microsoft Excel kind of just removed the parts that were like personal identifiable. And that during the process, because of course that's like a very hard task to do by hand, some issues that were like data was switching around a bit, which of course made it very hard to parse this in a machine and to load it in like further processing tools. So the first problem, because we of course wanted to help with that, was how can we even help with exporting anonymized data without getting database access? Because we also didn't want that, because that's just none of our kind of business to see this data. And the solution for that was to use a database schema, which is basically the structure of a database without any of the data. And so Matteo provided us with that. And to give you there's no need to actually read any of this. It's just to get like an overview. There were a lot of tables in there, 200 roughly plus minus tables, 2,600 columns spread across those tables. So there's a lot going on. And of course, for this project, just a minor part of the data was actually relevant here. But to even be like able to like in at least like a kind of convenient way to work with this database schema, we still needed to use some coding. So the first thing I've worked on for the project has been to first help with the exporting of the database schema. Then I helped write a Python script, which generated a SQL query. And SQL is kind of the programming language used to interact with databases, to like query the data from the database. So we created these SQL queries automatically, excluding all the information which we knew from like a dictionary that we didn't want to have. Stuff like names. We also rounded, for example, geolocation to have it like broad enough that it's only ever on like a city level. So we don't know actual like people's real locations. And these generated SQL queries were then run by someone from Matteo, which we just did over a Zoom call, on the database to generate the exports. So that worked out with, of course, a few hiccups in between. That worked out really well. So we got access to the data. And then the next big step in the project has been understanding the data. So to give you a bit of context here as well, just going to talk about like a part of the data here, just because there's a lot going on and we want to keep the presentation, of course, like within 15 minutes. And so the main piece of data that Matteo uses internally is the Child Status Index, CSI for short. And it's like an externally developed scale that has been developed by like researchers, and it's their main tool for assessment. So it assesses like a child's well-being on a total of 12 domains, always with ratings ranging from 1 to 4, where 4 is kind of like that's a solid situation, and kind of corresponds to the baseline we would have here in the Western world. And then like going lower from there, it corresponds to like problems. And there's of course like a lot of other data, and if people are interested, I'm happy to talk about that. But for now, I'm just going to focus on this Child Status Index. And one thing I want to highlight here is one of, I think for me at least, the big learning experiences also in this project has been how with the understanding of the data here, because we did this by walking through the journey of a single beneficiary as they interact with Matteo, from basically like when the first time they interact with the organization and they've been referred, all the way to like when they received an intervention or multiple interventions, and then in the end exited. And throughout that journey, when we discussed that with them and saw how it corresponds to like actual entries in the data, time and time again, we've been like surprised by how the data was kind of differently structured than you would expect by just looking at the data. So that really highlighted the importance of getting also always the input from the organization, because of course they're the experts with their data, what it means, and being like really highlighting that. So going a bit more into the Child Status Index, there's typically 3 kinds of ratings being done for every beneficiary. First, there's an intake rating, when a beneficiary first interacts with Matteo, these are always for children, of course. There might be follow-up ratings as they receive an intervention, if they receive an intervention, of course, else there would only be an intake rating. And then once they received all the interventions, and this is they're exiting the organization, there's one final exit rating of their current situation on the child status index. And so the way Matteo currently also examines, and also the way we wanted to approach this, is by looking at the impact as kind of the difference between the exit and the intact child status. Just to give you an idea here. And then once we actually dived further into the data, analyzing it in the first bits, we get to the part where we were very surprised by the data, because looking at these types of ratings and how they follow onto each other, we actually, the first thing we stumbled upon is that these didn't exactly correspond to our expectations here, because it was very much expected that it would always be this intake, maybe one or more follow-ups, and then an exit. And when we look at the data here, you can see how it's split up, because these are always the first type of rating a person has, then the second and the third. And you can see by these gray bars how they follow onto each other. So we see that, thankfully, for the majority, the first rating that people have is an intake rating. But actually what was very surprising is that it's not the case for everyone. And this has been really a huge surprise to us and to the organization. And then if you go further to the right, things become a bit more messy. But while the majority of cases corresponds to this expectation, we were very surprised to find that this is not the case for all of them. And so this really made us reevaluate our current approach to the project. Because looking back at the goals, we first wanted to understand and assess the impact. Now we weren't so sure anymore how we could even do this. So kind of going back and looking at it from a bit further out, what our actually main goal was. And it actually has always been to kind of provide the maximum value for Matteo. So in that way, we kind of readjusted throughout the project, and first identified the key issues of, okay, first, we want to validate all these assumptions that are in the data, that are about the data, check whether these assumptions are met. If not, either fix them or maybe at least try to figure out how they occur. And also maybe update processes going further to improve data collection there. And then in the future, we're going to look at the impact, use insights from there to improve efficacy going forward after that, all those things. So going back to the kind of previous slide here, the next thing I did as part of the project is look at these surprising parts of the data. And I've been searching for patterns there that might explain how these occur. And here's, for example, one of the many plots I created throughout this kind of research where I dived deeper into those. And for example, one of our first ideas was, okay, maybe this is something that occurred at the very end of data collection, at the very beginning of data collection, when processes were still new. But for example, as you can see in this plot, that shows the distribution of these first types of ratings over the time collection for beneficiaries. So we would have then expected to only have these occur at maybe the very beginning here. But as you can see, these are actually merged with the overall initial type of ratings. So there's no clear effect over time here, apart from, of course, the big gap in between where COVID-19 first hit. But there's nothing here where it's different between these different types of ratings. And in that regard, we explored many different hypotheses of what might explain this effect. But in the end, actually, we didn't find any clear patterns that would explain this. And also more simpler hypotheses, such as, oh, these are probably just mislabeled. We could also, refute, because we found systematic effects between these different initial types of ratings. So they were different. And it was not just mere mislabeling. So in the end here, we arrived at the most likely explanation being network issues, where these intake ratings that would have occurred before these ratings were due to network issues, because of course there's the data collection app is running on mobile phones. Everyone knows bad reception, so that most likely these were randomly kind of falling through the holes. And for example, one of the big takeaways from this is has been to, going forward, hopefully improve the reliability of the app, and that if data is not, if mobile phone connection has been lost, the data is being cached and then sent later when, for example, you're connected to Wi-Fi or something. And this has been just one example of like different kinds of analyses we ran in that regard. And also to provide a bit more of an outlook, we also did do some first looks at the impact of Macheo, using then just subsets of the data where we were very sure in our trust in the data there. But of course, it limited kind of the scope of analysis we were comfortable doing at that point in time. So, but I think you can see really nicely here, this graph shows the different distributions of CSI ratings on the intake when a beneficiary is first seen compared to their ratings on the exit. You can really see that like the big red and orange chunks, which are like the especially problematic situations, have been like shrunk down a lot. And it's really almost completely eliminated. And just for like a tiny fraction, most also like typically corresponding to the ones that are coming from a 1, that are still like struggling a bit to like get to the really nice higher values here. But I think it is very clear to see this impact there already. And there will of course be further analyses to look at that. Also, if we look at it at like the broader picture, not sure whether this is perfectly readable on your screens, but this is also just meant to give like an idea of, we can really see how these like orange and red bars are just like kind of crushed away as the impact. And of course, one thing to keep in mind here, because we also see a lot of course, green at the beginning. This is across all the participants, irrespective of the intervention they received. So it's typically the case that someone would have a low rating on one of these CSI scales. And that is, of course, then addressed. But that's why you also see a lot of green in the other scales. So just something to keep in mind there. And looking a bit more in the future, or towards the end of this project for me, my final delivery in this internship has been reports of these insights and recommendations based on those to Macheo, which has been really nice to be able to deliver something to them. It was also very cool to see that because we had this adjustment in the middle of, okay, let's focus on the data quality first here. We, of course, didn't make it all the way to doing further inferential analyses. So a group of new volunteers took over at the end of my main involvement in the project, which has been really nice to also see them progressing on the project, and probably at a future event that I'll be talking here as well. And I still remain in touch with Macheo and these new volunteers, which is a very nice experience, and I can very much recommend that as well. And of course, want to end with a big thank you to especially Andrew, who has been the main advisor throughout my internship with CorrelAid. Of course, he's also running a lot of things, and also all the CorrelAid Netherlands core members who has been very welcoming and also organizing this event. Also very much to Marnix and James from Macheo, who made this project possible and are really doing like very awesome work all the way in Kenya. Humart, who has also provided really useful insights throughout this project, and he's currently volunteering with Macheo. He went from the Netherlands to Kenya right now to volunteer with Macheo. And then very much to Julian, Johnny, Dylan, Odysseus, and Wally, who are currently continuing this project. They're like the volunteers now working on it. That is it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the presentation. Yeah, any questions again, chat or raise your hand. Yeah, so Jan, you've finished up your data science master's. Can you give some insights on something you learned from doing a project that you hadn't learned in your master's?
I think very much the more working with real world data. I think the two big things I took away from this internship have been, first, to always be explicit about the actual goal you're working on, which in our case has been providing the maximum value. Now it's keeping that in mind and being willing to switch interim goals to stay on track for this bigger goal. And I think also, of course, working with real world data and kind of the problems you encounter on that, understanding it and cleaning it has been very different from the data you encounter in university typically.
Awesome. Three-part-ish question. So
Cool.
let's talk about the data-drivenness of Matteo. So how big is their want to be data-driven? How prepared are they to be data-driven at the start of your internship? And then the impact that your project had. How did you help them become more data-driven?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're already first of all, the one you might have to remember me on the other two parts. But first of all, I think the one is very big there. And they're already also doing great steps on becoming even more data-driven, but they're already collecting all this data, having it very central in how they operate. It's really used for decision-making. It's a central part of how the organization operates. And I think in that regard, they're already set up really well, and they have this really big motivation on becoming even more data-driven. And I think the impact we were able to do there already has been just to kind of improve on these processes, help them identify some issues that were there, and already steps have been taken to address some of the issues in the data collection. And it's been an ongoing thing where they're improving things across the board and already doing like an awesome job. They have like dashboards and everything where they're using this data that they collect already, and they're very willing to just like always improve their processes like bit by bit, which is I think very amazing to see.
Awesome, thanks. Anyone else with some questions? All right, then let's give Jan another round of applause. So one thing I've shared in the chat now is the link to contribute. So you've heard from three people who are part of three teams to help NGOs become to use the tools that data science has developed and open sourced. Maybe good to also talk about CorrelAid and how we do this and what our bottlenecks are. So you've heard from three projects. I would say scoping these projects is our main bottleneck. We have 300 volunteers who say, yeah, if there's a project, sign me up. And I think currently 30, maybe 35 people who are actively donating their time 4 hours a week. That means that there's a lot of people waiting for projects. So scoping these projects themselves is difficult because there is a gap between what NGOs believe data science is, what we can do with it, either overestimating it and saying we're doing artificial general intelligence, or underestimating it and saying we have no clue what data science is. So that's where a lot of our time goes into. Currently, we have, I think, 7 or 8 people volunteering their time to reach out to these NGOs, scope out projects with them, or run these events, which also get us leads to get in touch with NGOs that could use a project. If you have any contacts with NGOs where you think this could be useful to get them in touch with CorrelAid, don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you want to join this NPO engagement team, you're more than welcome. Again, through the contribute link, you can find how to get in touch with us, or you can shoot us a mail directly. My email is andrew@correlaid.nl. And if you think, ooh, these are cool projects, I might not have time or the reach to find new projects. But if something comes up that matches my skill set, we release scoped projects onto our mailing list, which you can also reach from the contribute button. All right, I think that is all for tonight.